I have the pleasure yet again of being joined by a featured guest, Zhi Lin, who is a partner at Deloitte Engineering. Yun, great to see you. Thanks again for making time to catch up with me.
Oh, always a pleasure, Des, and thank you for having me back.
Absolute pleasure. Now, in a previous conversation, you highlighted something I just wanted to touch on, and that is that rather fortuitously, your parents named you around the technology stack that you're involved in currently with regard to Yun, meaning cloud, I believe. And the second part of your name being around luck or fortuitous good fortune, which when I looked into it was just like, wow, that is mind-boggling. I think that needs to be a story or a blog in itself. Um, so for attendees today, or for our audience today, just to dial in, just to set the scene. So when we talked to you recently with regard to your sponsorship as a
Mhm.
gold sponsor for both the Melbourne and Sydney ExecOps events, we talked about your role, a 30,000-foot view of what Deloitte Engineering entails and the capabilities. We certainly looked at a day in the life and a range of things around that,
Mhm.
which was a fantastic conversation. Today, I wondered if we could maybe delve into more of Deloitte Engineering, the organization. It's called competencies, capabilities, what a normal or an ideal journey for a custom engagement experience might be like. And maybe look at some of the technologies that we've seen in the past and where they've led us to, and particularly around the big AI topic and break that out.
Mhm.
Um, could you maybe just walk us through in a couple of minutes of sort of the key pillars that when we think about Deloitte as a brand, we've known as a professional services and consulting advisory type business in that space. But when we think about Deloitte Engineering, it may not be something that people are overly familiar with yet, but we'd like to make sure they are leading up to the events and certainly for conversations past the event. Give us a breakdown of kind of Deloitte Engineering, what it is, what the key pillars and competencies are, and we can then dive into those in a bit more detail if you don't mind.
Yeah, definitely. So, as part of Deloitte Engineering, altogether, we have access to around 500 engineers, right, specialized in software, cloud, infrastructure, engineering related advisory. We also have access to 500 or so AI and data professionals, right? And the entire team is further enriched by industry experts that specialize in the sectors around government, health, banking, and emerging industries. So all in all, we are very full stack to really go in and understand the business problem, the customer problem of your organization, work through some of the strategies, the operating model that's needed to enable this particular technology, and then go into implementation uh, from the application layer to the infrastructure layer, and then moving into operations, um, uh, managed services, or transition back to your teams to manage and run. Um,
Yep.
in terms of the implementation, I guess we can sort of break that into, we did mention there is that advisory operating model aspect, right? Whether it comes to sort of engineering or some of the AI strategy and operating model that is needed. There is the element of integrating existing systems together or modernize, because let's face it, right? Not all large organizations will be greenfield. I've done my greenfield build in my day with a startup, but most organizations at a larger scale will require some level of integration or modernizing existing legacy. When it comes to a solid foundation to build upon, whether it's a container runtime, container platform, AI runtime, with the likes of Amazon Agent Core, right, to have an enterprise-ready agent platform. That is also the bread and butter of what we do to ensure that organizations such as, highly regulated organizations for our clients will have a secure, right, well-monitored framework that is compliant with their regulatory needs that can allow them to innovate on microservices and agents and various experiments with the pathway to then go into production. Right? So
Right.
that foundational platform engineering for containers and AI is also a sort of a very critical part of what we do. And last but not least, a lot of the sort of infrastructure, networking, security concern that comes with enabling the platform to enable the use cases, to enable the modernization integration, and to then ultimately realize the strategy and the operating model that we set, right? It all comes together to form an end-to-end engineering proposition.
When I think about what I've learned about Deloitte Engineering, and not just in the last sort of 24 to 48 hours preparing for this conversation, but certainly since its evolution as an organization, sort of as part of the Deloitte brand, one of the things that always struck me, and I'd love you to sort of maybe just delve into this a little bit and break it out, is that for a lot of your customers, I imagine they are not engineering or software engineering or organizations. They might be a bank, they might be a transport company, a logistics company, a retail company, they might be a Department of Education, state agency or government agency, might be a tax office. So they're not necessarily an engineering group. They don't have that skill and competency. So I imagine, and most, if not all of your client engagements and certainly your partner work, you're coming to this as their sort of bolted hit partner with that core competency, their core, the core skill set. That's not their core business. You know, when I think about a bank, regardless of which size bank or brand bank it is, they're a bank. That's their core business, is being a bank, and wealth and asset management and investment management, private banking, investment banking. They are not an engineering firm. They're not, certainly not a software and AI specialist. So I imagine they come to you and your team there at Deloitte Engineering with that desire and certainly expectation that you are the experts and you are going to be their business partner that gets them through these business initiatives or acquisitions or new trials or proof of concepts to deliver outcomes and successful outcomes, because that's not their core business.
I think yes, that I think we do find in a number of our sort of larger banking clients that they do see that technology is a very integral part of what they do.
Hmm.
But however, we do sort of also work very closely with our government clients, who, you know, their core competency is to serve the people, right? And in terms of technology, they do lead to the experts such as us, where we can bring our local understanding of the government regulation. We have security cleared personnel to carry out the work, but we also do bring the global expertise around what other governments are doing nationally, right? So definitely for clients who have that technology pedigree, who likes to build and run themselves, we can bring the thought leadership, local and globally, to just give them that extra hand, right? Give them that
Yeah.
acceleration, that extra thought leadership, like, oh, have you thought about this, right? You know, this is what we have done. Let us share some knowledge, let us help you out, and then we will transition handover back for you to run it. For our clients who don't see technology as their core competency, who says, hey, look, we need your help to build this out and we need you to run it for us, right? And we offer that capability to build a transition back to our own operation team, who use, you know, a lot of our own internal tooling around AI, around having agents, right, to augment a lot of the sort of mundane sort of management work. We offer that service, right, as a service to our clients to take care of a lot of that day-to-day, you know, looking through tickets, right, managing the various technology landscape for them, right?
Right.
Yep.
And if I break this into sort of two sides of the coin, one of the things that really jumped out at me, and certainly for the last few years of my own sort of work in this space, is that it's easy to follow the new shiny thing of AI and so forth, and everyone lead into that. But it's still the case that a lot of the core technologies you're working with are things that have, you know, evolved over the last 10 or 15 years, you know, sort of, you know, secure networking, cybersecurity, ransomware, router switches, servers, data centers, hyperscaler cloud migrations, transitions, big data, data lakes, databases. These technologies, I mean, they haven't just magically gone away because of AI. These must still be a core part of what you bring to the table, that are in many ways foundational technologies that, again, that you are world leaders in, your thought leaders in, but also practitioners with core competencies, and some of the biggest brands in the world as your partners.
Yeah, I think there's some really good thought leadership that our sort of Deloitte team have written recently. So our Deloitte's global agentic leader, Stuart Scotus, is actually based in Australia. So he recently
Okay.
wrote an article with David Alonso, who is our national AI market leader. So the two of them have written about the need for strategy, right, in the AI adoption, right? Experiments are great, but experiments would not equate to strategy, right? If anything, the need to drive AI as an enterprise capability with a proper strategy behind it is every leader's responsibility, right? So it's a very insightful article recently released in the Australian. It's actually one of a three-part series. There was also another article recently written by is actually my sort of the leader of the portfolio that I work in, Jason Hutchison, around, and also James Allen, who is the Deloitte engineering leader, my boss. So Jason and James wrote an article around picking the right platform, right? And also the right infrastructure approach to how you enable and scale AI as well. So I think a lot of the concepts around strategy, platform, infrastructure, operating model, right? Like it's actually fundamentals and a repeat of what we used to do in the cloud adoption space, I feel, right? When you're moving to the cloud, you have to think about it as an enterprise-wide capability. You have to have a strategy on what you're actually trying to achieve. What are you trying to measure? What are some of the total cost of ownership? What is the above the line benefit versus below the line cost? We did that, right? But we're now in the cloud. Now with AI, everyone is resorting to what we used to do, which is, hey, let's experiment, right? So I think it's actually a bit of history repeating itself under a different and very exciting technology, right? A lot more exciting compared to what used to be a lot of, I guess, one-to-one migration, whereas now AI does present very sort of advanced use cases, but then it does sort of bring back the need to have the right governance, right? The right assessment, prioritization, deduplication, right? Because with great power, right, that famous statement, great power comes great responsibility, but that can also lead to great cost.
Indeed.
Right? If used in an ungoverned approach, and as we know, with tech sprawls can be expensive, but AI sprawl, agent sprawl, which is actually we do see that. We are actually beginning to see that, right? With a number of experiments that are going out there without the right governance and the right strategy and the right platform, you can actually end up with AI and agentic sprawl and duplications that leads to cost, but it also widens one's attack surface, right? It also leads to a bit of a
Yeah.
security and compliance issue. Yeah.
Well, in fact, we ran a survey privately of over 8,000 key decision leaders all the way up to CEOs, but particularly CTOs, CIOs, chief data officers, chief risk officers, and so forth, database administrators, and so forth. And what we found is about 80% of them in private warned that their data wasn't actually ready for AI. They had it in databases. They had it, for if it was a traditional, off-the-shelf platform, whether it was SAP, whether it was something in on-prem or in a data center being hosted by a third party, whether it was a SaaS offering like Salesforce, it could be just stuff sitting on their storage area network. Many of them didn't quite know where it was. They didn't know the state of it, the health of it. They didn't always know who had access to it and what type of access, whether it was read-only or read and write and so forth, whether they could download and copy it, whether they could make copies for testing and development and training. And it was interesting through the survey, we found that quite a few alarm bells went off for some of these CXOs saying, you know what, this is a good question. I'm not sure. And what we found was 80% of them at least were saying that their data wasn't ready for AI. But what we found was that nearly 100% couldn't actually state whether they were ready for AI as an organization when we went through some of those checklists that you just mentioned there. And that had them going back to some of their traditional things of like, okay, what databases have we got? What's running on those? What servers are they running on? Are they Windows machines, Linux machines? Are they on-prem? Are they in a data center? Do we manage and own them? Are they leased? Are they rented? Are they a third-party outsource? Is it a managed service? Has it been migrated into a cloud? And if so, which cloud? And all those little things, and even down to like, where is it backed up? Where is it archived? Can we get archived copies to do analysis on? Can we see the last 15 years worth of data to do some predictive analysis on what we've seen in there? And I found that quite astounding. And again, that comes back to, I guess, something you mentioned earlier, which is when you walk in the door, all of that kind of thinking comes with you. I imagine that there's
Yes.
this, you kind of fill that vacuum of unknown and uncertainty with your capability, whether it's you personally and professionally, whether it's your team, whether your organization, Deloitte Engineering. That must come as a sense of relief for a lot of clients who can sort of not so much just pass the hot potato, but certainly hand on the baton as part of that long distance run as a team to go, okay, can you take the baton and run with it while help us fill the gaps? Is that an experience that you sort of have on a regular basis? I imagine where organizations have that uncertainty, that those gaps, those voids, and you come in and help them fill them in the short term to map that roadmap out to sort of get to the point, okay, well, where are we now? What is your roadmap? What's your plan? What governance you got in place? What controls? what compliance and regulatory requirements have you got? What are your internal policies? What external things do you have to need to? That must be a big part of it before you even get to the point where you're writing code and building proof of concept, surely.
Yeah, definitely, because we're seeing so much clients across the
Yeah.
spectrum, right? Like, clients as mentioned who treat technology as part of the core competency in addition to their industry focus, right? You know, they are a technology company focused on banking versus government, whose, our primary objective is to make sure that driver licenses get processed on
Yeah.
time, right, for our taxpayers. Um, so we know the maturity model and we know what's the right fit. So by all means, like the sort of the way we typically engage is through a conversation, right? Right, unless it's a formal response, right, to an RFP. But a lot of sort of conversation really is actually what led to next steps. And we are not always crash hot on getting in there to say, hey, let's implement something, because sometimes it's actually not the right use case for AI,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like even machine learning or generative AI, right, let alone agents, sometimes you just need plain old robotic automation, right? That can get the job done, right? If that particular use case is very deterministic and very repeatable, right? It's only like agentic generative AI really comes into play when you need that deep reasoning, right? That next level of automation and handling really nuanced and dynamic situations like a human. But
Yeah.
then again, that sort of then brings back a lot of the fundamentals, as you mentioned, Des, the data quality, right? If the data quality is not there, and we know this for a fact that the large language model companies are already saying the entire publicly available information has been ingested now into their LLMs, right? So if the LLM has already has the public information and they are really keen to get hold of the proprietary information from the enterprises and business entities, so the only way for sort of for such a model and such an agentic process or generative AI process to work in the organization is to really overlay that with your proprietary data to really sort of make it tailored to your organization processes and institutional memory. But if that data is not available and is actually in
Yeah.
people's minds, that does pose a problem, right? So actually, a lot of the sort of what we do see is the opportunities to sort of take that next step level of automation and being able to really augment some of the human context switching and allow a lot of the leaders to really focus on their, leadership as opposed to doing daily BAU. Is actually being held back by the data quality because that information, unfortunately, is sitting with particular leaders and particular sort of operational folks and particular SMEs in their particular fields, right? So again, it does come back to it's not a silver bullet. It's not a one size fit all. It does come back to foundational data quality and how that can be
Mm-hmm.
addressed before taking the step. But as you mentioned, we do lay out that roadmap based on the maturity on how they can sort of proceed towards sort of their desired target state.
On the other side of the coin, then, as you just outlined with all of those topics around AI, and then certainly the fact that AI is not just about the data, but also the metadata around the data. So the data of the data, the description of the data, the location, the control of the trust. When we think about one side of the coin with some of the more traditional technologies that have come from databases and data lakes and so forth into that data set, when we think about the AI element, and you've touched on a few of those things, a lot of people just sort of throw AI into one big bit bucket. But as you said, it could be just basic machine learning to do
Yeah,
things like recognize a signature, for example. It could be robotic process automation,
yeah.
which we've been doing for over a decade and successfully. But then it could also be a generative trained transformer or GPT that we can have a plain English conversation with to ask it questions about the data,
Mhm.
which I think, back in 2023, GPTs became popular when OpenAI sort of made their chat GPT available. But, a lot of people sort of think that's the only one. But then, nowadays you've got Gemini built into all of the Google workspace. You've got Copilot built into Microsoft stack. You've got other third parties like Perplexity AI, which is trying to be more of an AI search engine. Um, when you walk in the room and someone hands you the whiteboard marker and says, there's the whiteboard, map out what AI is for us in plain English. At 30,000 foot sort of point of view, how do you break out the core elements of sort of what is quote unquote AI? Because it is a very complex topic, but if you were to dumb it down like I'm a 3-year-old, how do you sort of tell me in a couple of minutes, like, what is AI today? You know, when we think about the core elements, and I'd love to dive into some of those bits you're working with clients on for problem solving, but you know, the AI one-on-one, what are the core elements in that you work with so that clients can, and certainly for our audience who are coming to ExecOps as part of your gold sponsorship, I want to lead them to sort of understand some of the things they can have a conversation with you about, and specifically how to break out AI so that they're not just talking about AI as some sort of magic brush or silver bullet, but an actual thing, whether it's machine learning, robotic process automation, GPTs, as you talked about, you know, training language models, whether it's someone's third-party language model that's built on stuff they scraped off the internet, whether it's a private language model they built on their internal data. How do you break that up? How do you, in plain English, describe sort of AI, quote unquote?
Yeah, I think
That's a big
that
one.
is a yeah, that is a good one. I do feel that sort of this day and age with the plethora of AI that's in all the sort of our phones, our internet, all the Copilot that's in Office Suite. I think most technology or even business leaders, they do have a sense of the AI, right? But I guess if I were to sort of look at explaining this in terms of a spectrum, right? So back in the pre-machine learning days, we had just state machines and expert systems, right, that play chess, right? A number of
Yeah.
permutations that's all memorized by the machine that can beat the national chess champion at the time. And then we sort of then move into the world of machine learning and then deep learning, with the likes of AlphaGo that can actually just use more advanced neural networks, right, to then play really advanced games such as Go, right? And then later move on to StarCraft, etc. But I guess sort of now we're living in the age of where, with the likes of generative and agentic AI, they are able to sort of apply by having pretty much the entire internet, right, in a large language model. They do offer a lot sort of to most of the use cases that we can throw at the model with just natural language, right? And being able to apply a level of reasoning beyond what traditional machine learning can offer, right? And if faced with something that is unknown, that is where that reasoning really comes to shine. Because typically with machine learning, standard like image recognition, like hot dog, not a hot dog, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
has to have seen that before. Whereas a human child, if you show it, a toy tiger, and if it's a real tiger, it can reason and infer that is a real tiger, right? I better watch out. Whereas machine learning wasn't able to do that unless you show it a real tiger, right? Whereas with the sort of generative and the more advanced sort of AI that we have now, is able to infer based on what it knows because it knows so much, right, about the entire sort of public domain data it has. It's actually able to infer that, oh, based on what I know, this is what I think. And that's what it makes it really powerful for some of the really nuanced use cases that does require human reasoning and human sort of differentiation. And the situation is very dynamic and non-deterministic. And I think that is typically what I sort of do tell my client is that if you have a use case, let's not talk about agentic, right? Let's talk about what that use case is. What does a human do,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And chances are, if the human's there, that means it's nuanced, right? Because otherwise, there's tools, right? Every single large organization have a number of tools and automation. We got pipelines for software. We have OCR for image recognition and signatures. And then we also have other sort of, the traditional RPA for filling in forms, right? Why are those not tools not being used? Because there's a level of inference and differentiation and reasoning involved that requires a human brain. Okay, then that might be a use case, right, for agentic and generative, right? Whereas the agents really just take that to the next level where each agent does one particular thing as opposed to generative AI, which tries to do many things and do many things equally bad. But the agent can actually focus with a lot more context, also overlaid through retrieval augmentation, some of the client's organizational specific information, right? So
Right.
that is sort of where I will sort of lead the client towards to say, well, let's really figure it out, right? Is it really a matter of process being broken down or lack of automation, or is it really a generative or a generative AI problem to solve?
I love it. For the attendees coming to the ExecOps and BeerOps events, I wonder if we can sort of wrap up on this one then.
Mhm.
One of the things that I like to sort of help attendees do, as we spoke about previously, last time we caught up, was sort of doing a little bit of homework, preparing for the events. And when I come to these events, I try to sort of do a little bit of a homework about, who are you, what's your role, what's your responsibility, what's a day in your life like, what does your organization do, what business unit are you in? But I also think about it from the point of view of how can I get the maximum value out of the conversation with you and access to you? Because access to you is not something I might readily get. Getting into your calendar and your busy life and your schedule is probably very difficult on a day-to-day basis. But here you are right in front of me, and I can quite literally walk up to you. And even that's called beer ops or exec ops. There is plenty of
Mhm.
non-alcoholics. So you might be having a glass of wine or a beer, and I'll be having a Coca-Cola. Um,
Mhm.
to have that opportunity to talk directly to you, I always want to
Yeah.
respect you and your time and your experience and knowledge. Um, with that in mind, one of the things I'd love for you to help me outline for attendees is to sort of understand, to get the maximum value from the opportunity to talk to you, is
Yeah.
kind of what is an ideal engagement like for you and your team at Deloitte Engineering, so that when someone has a conversation with you, what types of questions ideally will they ask you, and what sort of takeaways should they look at, such when they go not just the event, but when they go back to their office, go back home, working, whatever, and they sort of think about their role and their responsibility in their own businesses and how you can help. What does a normal sort of engagement, an ideal engagement from start to finish look like, no matter how long, whether it's 6 months, 3 months, a year, 10
Yeah.
years, or whatever? What does an ideal client engagement look like from your point of view within Deloitte Engineering, your team, such that the attendees can sort of understand that and think, okay, well, if I bring questions to you, what are some of the steps and the stages in that relationship beyond the event that you might be able to help my organization with? What does that look like in that sort of client engagement journey and in an ideal scenario?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think this is probably always good to set the expectations as well, because of the fact that Deloitte is a large organization. The type of engagement that we do and the problem that we look to solve are some of the most wicked problems, right? At the Australian federal level, state level, right? The bigger banks, etc. So like by all means, our teams are very excited, right, about solving hard problems. Come to us with a problem, right? Definitely sort of open to discuss some of the learnings, right, without sort of giving away some of the sensitive information that we do sort of need to protect our clients with. However, to engage with Deloitte, it does need to be a sizable problem, a long-term one. And, there are a lot of sort of smaller boutiques as well. I came from one for that matter that can sort of tackle the smaller problems. But for
Right.
a large wicked problem, say typically we do aim for a longer period of time, right?
Yep.
Looking at 6 to 12 months. We can obviously do a bit of a discovery exercise for 2 to 3 months to further bottom out some of the unknown unknowns, right? Before moving to a larger engagement. And the team size is typically is a bit larger as well than
Hmm.
the sort of a POC team, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
I guess, if it's a large problem, if it's impacting the entire organization, well, the entire business unit, if it's impacting your customers, then definitely let's have a conversation. And all things start with a conversation with us. Like, there's no salespeople, right? I deliver, right? I problem solve with my team. And then, I follow the process through and the buck stops with me, right? So that's the beauty of
Perfect.
the partnership, is that, you won't be handed over from a salesperson to to a delivery person and then, completely get the A team to the B team, right? Me and my team will follow throughout until we get the job done.
I like
Um,
that. The old
yeah,
one throat to choke, but
yeah,
also one, a single source of truth.
yes.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate that. And I think you've set the ground very well there. And that is that, as far as the event goes, whether it's Beer Ops and Exec Ops, and again, congratulations on your gold sponsorship of Exec Ops in Sydney and Melbourne, an enormous successful support of the entire ecosystem and the events. Um, for people to come along and ask you good questions, and as Australia's largest tech networking event, it is, as you said in our last conversation, come along with your QR codes ready on LinkedIn, so forth, create some
Mhm.
contacts, have some good conversations. But also for our audience, whether it's my audience or whether it's yours or Beer Ops and Exec Ops broadly, I do want them to sort of come along with a view of firstly just respecting you and your role and your responsibility and your time and not so much just your seniority, because we like to level the playing field, as you said, at all walks of life and experience, but also be mindful that if I'm going to put a question to you, make it something that both of us are going to get something out of, so that, yes, you can probably give me some insights, but can you help me in 3, 6, 12 months? Maybe, maybe not. So pre-qualify that and make sure that you're going to respect your time and get good value out of it for both parties, because I think it's easy to go into a conversation without any homework, without any due diligence per se, and then trip over and sort of, feel a little bit silly when you realize, oh, you can't take on this little tiny piece of work because you're a very large organization and you specialize in working on very big problems. But at the same time, I'm sure you can get them some advice on careers and things. But no, that's great. I think that's a really good, honest setting in the scene for that, because that, in my mind, is the way to get the most from an event, is to go into understanding with some idea and some expectation of sort of what to see, who to see, and how to best gain value from that. Now, I know when we spoke last, we asked you this, but I wonder if we can just, for folk who may have only just tuned to this conversation, what are the best ways to keep up to date with what you're doing professionally, what the organization of Deloitte Engineering is doing, so that people
Yep.
can potentially follow you on digital and social platforms, keep up to date with your website and bookmark it, leading up to the event, but also post-event? Can you, what are you working on? What are your announcements and so forth? Where's the best place to find you? Where's the best place to follow you and keep up to date and just stay abreast of what you're doing and some of your new announcements and innovations and new offerings?
Yeah, so the best place to follow me personally, and I represent the company as one of the many engineering partners, is on LinkedIn at Mr. Serverless. There is a number of thought leadership articles coming through the Australian. We do have a multi-part article around AI strategy, platform infrastructure. Then definitely take a look out. But I will be reposting those on LinkedIn as well. I myself will be making a number of announcements around mid-October with the AWS team around some of the very forward-thinking agentic solution, a very different solution tackling a very different market that
Oh, wow.
we don't see is being tackled right now. In a very saturated agentic sort of AI tooling space, I feel like our product does stand out, and that will be sort of announced. So definitely look out for that, which I will post in due time. And yeah, and there is always a Deloitte Engineering website where we are always on the lookout for hiring. Find out about what we do. If you're interested in joining us, either reach out to me or apply through the website. We're always looking to expand and grow. So
Fantastic.
yeah, and as mentioned, we do offer quite a variety of different tech stacks and different clients and a very wide vantage, right, across what is happening in the world of tech
I love
across the
it.
whole of Australia. Yeah.
And I'd be amazed if you and your team can't address the problem and solve it, but you've also got some very, very big friends with very, very big shoes and very, very big platforms can also support you and back you up. Ewan, it's been so great to see you again. Thank you so much for making time to catch up with me yet again. We will have you back again, I hope, to talk about your news when it is announced. But in the meantime, safe travels. And again, congratulations and thank you for your support of BeerOps and ExecOps. And particularly your gold sponsorship of ExecOps in Melbourne and Sydney coming up. And folks that are tuned in, Melbourne is going to be October the 22nd. Sydney is going to be October the 28th. If you haven't already, jump in now on beerops.io and register, or at least learn about the events. Even if you register and for some reason they sold out, there is a wait list, I'm told, by Stephen Wallace, who runs the thing. And if someone drops out for some reason, travel, sickness, health, or whatever the case might be, you may be then made a ticket made available. But even if you're not in an area of Melbourne and Sydney and can't attend, register, get on the mailing list, and keep up to date with what's happening. That's where you'll find about great conversations like this interview and many others. You will see other great posts that are coming out of the ecosystem, and there's just a whole space there that you can be part of that is bigger and better than just one event on just one day. Ewan, thank you so much for your time. It's been great to see you again. Would love to have you back once you announce your exciting new news with AWS. But in the meantime, safe travels. Looking forward to seeing you in Melbourne and Sydney in person. And then folks for tuning in, thanks for dialing in. Wherever you see this, you will have links available, whether it's on our video platform on videon.com, whether it's on our YouTube channel, whether it's on a social media post. There will be links and other details to all the relevant information for the BeerOps website to learn about the events coming up for Melbourne and Sydney, to learn about how to connect with Yun on LinkedIn professionally, how to follow the Deloitte Engineering website and bookmark it. Make sure you do your homework. Stay tuned, and we'll look forward to seeing you on another show again soon, folks. But Ewan, thanks for your time. It's been great to see you again, and we'll look forward to having you back again another day.
Yeah, thank you, Des.